Disclaimer: this video will contain content and discussions about suicide, depression, insanity, abuse, and violence. I advise that if you are sensitive to these topics, you may not want to watch the video. Hello, my name is Hunter Collins. I have played games ever since I was 2 years old, and I love to analyze video games. Currently, I am majoring into video game design and development at Kennesaw State University. With that out of the way, I think you can trust with what I have to say in this analysis. Starting off, this video is not a literal interpretation, but it is my interpretation of Silent Hill 2's story through the use of symbolism and analysis. I have used references from another YouTuber, Lotus Prince, and the wiki of Silent Hill 2. Links in the description. Why am I doing this? Silent Hill 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. It covers one of the most gripping narratives in video games, even rivaling books and movies. It can be compared to gothic romantics of the 19th century, such as Crime and Punishment. I am creating this video to evaluate and support Silent Hill 2's story with the use of interpretations and symbolism. Also, to prove that games can have serious tones and themes, and still be classified as a game. Let's get started. Also, I want to clarify, I will not talk about the monster symbolism in the game. I am explicitly talking about characterization of the main cast, mainly James. I will probably make a video in the future discussing the main monsters of the game. Now, what is Silent Hill 2? The story of Silent Hill 2 begins with a man named James Sunderland who recently received a letter from his late wife Mary. Particularly Mary, according to James, has been deceased for 3 years due to that damn disease. As it is written, in my restless dreams, I see that town Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place waiting for you. James is driven to this town to find Mary. On the way he meets 4 sub-characters, Angela, Eddie, Maria, and Laura. These characters have their own reasons to be in Silent Hill, but they encounter James often enough to be relevant to his goal. The main characters are James, a quiet and calm individual that is seeking his wife. Angela, a young, timid girl looking for her mother. Eddie, a young, overweight man that is running from the cops. Laura, a little girl that is friends with Mary. Maria, a woman that has no idea who she is but later comes to realize that she is an interpretation of evil Mary through James's eyes. Throughout the game, James meets with these people and interacts with them. Each encounter seems weirder than the last. Angela at first is timid, but then becomes suicidal and shows hatred towards James because of how she feels about men for what her father did to her. Eddie at first is scared and always defending himself because of his murders that he committed. He kills people because he hates being made fun of and eventually tries to kill James. Laura at first is a bratty girl that gets James into more trouble, but later reveals that she has a deep friendship with his wife Mary and looks up to him in some cases. Last but not least, Maria. At first, Maria is sexual and flirtatious towards James, but slowly after every time she experiences death, she becomes more like Mary and wants to be with James in any way possible for her. James must battle creatures, solve puzzles, and find his wife. Eventually, James realizes that he had killed his wife. She hasn't been dead for 3 years, instead she's been gone for only a week, and has came to Silent Hill after repressing his memories. Depending on the ending, James could end up being forgiven for his sins, or carelessly repeating them. James's main reason for killing his wife is not out of mercy, but because he felt she was a burden and wanted his life back. This game has 6 endings, but we'll only talk about 3 endings that are possibly canonical. These endings are Leave, In Water, and Maria. Generally, fans accept either Leave or In Water as the best plausible endings to James' story. The other endings are too strange or considered joke endings. They are Dog Ending, UFO, and Rebirth. We'll start with Leave. The Leave ending is known as the good ending. The woman at the end is Maria attempting to love James. James does not accept her. James meets with the real Mary. She forgives James for killing her. James leaves Silent Hill with Laura. Maria. The Maria ending is known as the bad ending. The woman at the end is Mary. She does not forgive James for his unfaithfulness. He leaves with Maria, and it shows that Mary develops a cough similar to Mary. The water ending is known to me as the somber ending. Mary forgives James, but James cannot cope with his loss. James carries Mary to his car and puts her in the front seat, and he drives into a lake to commit suicide to be with his wife in the afterlife. This game uses atmosphere to show isolation encounters. Isolation is used to drive fear, while encounters are to show fully realized characters that throw off the player into uncanny valley. Characters are the most important because they are the last bit of humanity that James has in the world. They drive the sense of narrative and progression. Angela is definitely the most introverted character of the cast. This 19-year-old is quiet, wears long sleeve sweaters, and talks in slow murmurs or aggressive outbursts. James meets her 4 times throughout the game in the Graveyard, Apartments, Labyrinth, and Lakeview Hotel. At first she is quiet and reserved. We only get subtle hints about why she's like that. Her goal is to find her family. Later James finds her facing a mirror which most likely represents duality and other parallels to her real life. When confronted, she reduces back to a childlike state of saying mama and that she's been bad. From the boss battle with Abstract Daddy, she deals with completely different traumatic experiences than Eddie or James. In her world, she sees flames. In the boss room, she sees fleshy walls and constant rhythm of pistons to represent sex. The flames represent hell, and the boss battle represents a man overpowering another smaller frame on a bed. I can associate this with her father's sexual abuse. She represents loss in James's world, in his lost quest for redemption. She is the reason why James feels that he had betrayed his wife. Eddie by far is the most obvious. Eddie is seen at first denying his kill in the apartments, then going through depression in the bowling alley, and then found in the labyrinth admitting his own sins. Just like Angela, James enters the world of what Silent Hill looks like to them. To Eddie, instead of fire and flesh, he sees frost and meat, specifically a meat locker. The meat in that locker wears clothes to resemble Eddie in his personal hell of dealing with insecurities, depression, and insanity. Eddie represents James's inability to admit his sins. James represses murdering his wife while Eddie represses his murdered victims. The labyrinth will always be a place where minor characters reveal their true selves to James. Mary is elusive. She shares the same appearance of James's wife Mary, but different. She is different with the clothes she wears, specifically skimpy skirts and the color red. She has seductive tone when speaking to James and will always want to be assured that James will protect her. Nothing is proven in the game, but it's thought that Silent Hill created Maria as a bad Mary for James. She acts sexy, represents sex, shares memories with Mary, and has died 3 times and came back. She is, however, self-aware that and knows about James's past. This is evident in the sub-scenario Born from the Wish, where you play as Maria. In the cell in the labyrinth, she starts talking like Mary and confuses James on whether she is Mary or not. Throughout the game, she is concerned with Laura, the other person she acknowledges. She never interacts or meets with Eddie or Angela. Her concern for Laura could represent the Mary manifestation inside her that makes James see. Similarly, in the hospital, she has to lay down because she doesn't feel well, similar to Mary's condition. Throughout the game, she is killed 3 times and reborn. She has a tattoo of a butterfly, which represents rebirth. While if she is the ending boss, she sends out moths to hurt James to symbolize death. Maria basically represents the form of Mary that James's male subconscious wishes he had. Depending on the choice of ending, Maria could be this. Silent Hill, as described by James, Eddie, and Angela. It represents inner demons that a person goes through. James experiences rust and sexualized monsters. Eddie deals with meat and cold. Angela deals with fire and abuse. I bring this up because Laura experiences the same, except Laura is too young to really have personal demons. Laura sees Silent Hill as a foggy, abandoned town. She never once acknowledges the monster, which brings the question, what is Laura here for? I personally think she is there as a reward and guide for James. Mary literally knew her, so maybe Silent Hill called her to guide James in the right direction to find out about his wife through her letter. James did not know that Mary planned to adopt her. When the player gets the leave ending, James is given Laura and freedom as a reward. Laura represents family and childhood innocence, in a time before James and Mary thought about having a child, but she succumbed to illness. That is the family part. Innocence plays like her nature. She thinks most of what James does is a game. She draws on glass door with a picture of a cat. She also locked James in a room and demanded for the magic word. This playfulness adds to her symbolism and innocence and family. Mary is represented as married to James, except with the twist. Mary really is dead, but her soul still wants James to find her. Depending on the ending, she will either forgive or stay angry at James. Mary is the driving force of what James desires. He desires his wife or someone like her, Maria. Mary's letter was not fully read at the beginning. James's self-conscious repressed the memory of reading the full letter. The full letter is longer and full of reasons why she felt bad. She wanted James to live a successful life, and she felt like a burden to him. She hated how she was always angry that she was going to die. Because of her anger, she in her own way repressed James. James then resented her. That is why he did not come to visit often. Doing this, she was able to form a close relationship with Laura and wanted to adopt her. She wished to see Silent Hill one more time, but never fulfilled that wish. She concluded to the letter that, James, you made me happy. If Mary, like the other characters, represents anything, it would be a tragic love and lost. Now that we're done with the sub-characters, we should come full circle and talk about James. James is one of the most complicated because of his attitude and calm nature. Simply, James is a man on a quest to find his dead wife while suppressing the memories that he killed his wife because he could not take the pressure of his wife anymore. He feels guilt for doing so. With the side characters represent a part of James, Angela's suicide and overpowering Eddie repression, Laura, innocence and family, Maria's sex and his past, Mary, love and lost. James has to have unique characteristics. He is brave, has nothing to live for, and wants to push forward. His wife really believes that he is very kind on the inside. Even after her death, she forgave him, depending on the ending. James honestly is a man that has made mistakes due to frustration and stress. He is only human and has made mistakes. Going through Silent Hill is enough punishment for him. Everything that is in the game is a representation of James's mind. Silent Hill reacts to his emotions. The further James goes through the game, the more everything rusts and combines with other people's personal hells. The monsters represent his sexual frustration and his situations in life. Overall, the town of Silent Hill hates James for being a man because of his primal instincts that men carry. That doesn't mean that the town doesn't hate someone like Angela, but because James's sexual repression and inner male primal instincts, the town takes advantages of his weaknesses. Pyramid Head, the most famous of Silent Hill monsters, was created as a manifest of James's inner desire to be punished for his sins. He can be seen as an exact parallel to James. The town's goal towards James is to show him the horrid nature of his actions, and hopefully rectifying his inner demons. The town is neither the enemy nor good nature, it is simply reflecting off of how James feels about everything. The concept of video games is to teach players new skills and overcome challenges through progress. Silent Hill 2 is one of the many masterpieces of games that blend morale and gameplay. The game's mature tone fits the atmosphere of the game and is meant for a more mature audience that can handle the content being displayed in the game. I demonstrated that the game is based around symbolism that shows the natures of gender and empowerment. The plot of Silent Hill 2 is a story that continues to be analyzed even after 14 years of its release. Everyone in the game is unique and deserves their spotlight. To sum it up, art exists in video games. The themes tying into sexuality and everyday fears such as bullying, depression, and abuse have great impact on players who have played the game. The game lingers on the players, and it forces them to think about the expressions that the main writers and designers wanted to show to everyone. I consider Silent Hill 2 art, not because it wants to be artsy or pretentious, because it functions like a game and carries a meaningful message. of finding yourself and who you really are. Thank you. If you want to see more videos in the future, let me know in the comments. You can also subscribe for weekly Let's Plays and gameplays. As always, it's been a Misogi Productions. Keep it pure, peaceful with you, and sayonara.